So I've been thinking about this for a while. We think about data all the time at CCNY. We are using AI frequently. And I was wondering, like, why do I feel the need to talk about this right this minute? And the reason is that these systems they're getting smarter and they're weirdly uneven. They're kind of jagged, and learning how to use these is urgent. We can't wait until someone knows all the answers to share with us and solve all the problems and run into all the potential challenges, because there will be new ones as we unfold. And we need to, as a community, talk about this. And when I mean community, I'm talking about those who deliver services to others, not for profit organizations. We have a different challenge than for profit organizations. We have two bottom lines. We have to be able to have enough money to do our mission. For profits just need one bottom line. And we have to make an impact in the community, because the money that we're given is there to also improve the lives of others. And with that comes responsibility, and it's hard. So we need to talk about that together and help each other out. And then the third thing is, some of us want to do that in a way that doesn't harm the environment and make it impossible for us to all live. So we have a high bar. With that being said, thought because of the challenges, let's talk about it. We're going to share a little bit about what we've done and go from there. But for your first interactive piece, again, menti.com, use that code that's on the screen. How are you feeling about AI today? And you can use the thumb, but you can also write. It's an open-ended question. You can write your responses. Those responses will show up here for everybody. Excited and terrified. I think that's, yeah. So awesome. Your responses are on this other screen, so I'll be looking over here. Yeah. Yeah. Give folks a second. If you want to vote on these things, you can. Give you a second to vote some of the answers. And then we'll go from there. I think, yeah, it's both, isn't it? It's what we've been experiencing is that it's amazing and creepy. That's what I said to somebody. And I'll share some examples of that in some areas. I want to point out, and this is just a differentiator that may not be important to you, but if anyone else is listening to this, we need to make sure it's clear that we're talking about generative AI, not AI in general. And the difference is that AI is software that helps make smart decisions. Maybe it's looking at a lot of data and it's made specifically for you. You have some AI tools out there. Generative AI is the kind of work that makes new things. It makes words, pictures, music based on your requests. And the reason why I want to focus on that is because that's so accessible right now. And I think we want to talk about that one in particular. And there's some things going on in the world, and it is concerning and exciting. And we're going to address some of these things. So in 2025, Fast Company, and the link is there on the screen. You should be able to click on it and use it. And if not, no worries. We're going to send this whole presentation out to people. That most companies in the for-profit world didn't have a strong AI policy. And that is a concern for not-for-profits as well. And I think when talking to my peers, have a lot of concerns about this tool. And so let's get ahead of it, and we'll share some of the solutions that we have. Another thing is there's stuff, and I'm going to use the word crap on purpose. You'll come in later, but these tools want to help us. and it will hallucinate solutions. This example here is a reading list in 2025. Chicago Sun-Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer ran a 15-book summer reading list, and only 5 of them were real. All the rest were AI hallucinations. And the freelance writer who wrote the piece used it, failed to check, admitted his fault, and then was no longer working for the organization, for the syndicator, which is, that's how, and it's so easy and swift that literally copy, paste, send, now it's out there and I've just lost my job. And people lost trust with these newspapers. So it's the sort of thing that you have to be careful of. And then I wanted to point out that some of our, when I was sharing this with the staff at CCNY, one of the things they wanted to point out, and I'd seen this in the newspaper, is that piece that not-for-profits care about, which is we are helping people. And we need to be aware of these tools because we already have an example of an AI companion working with a child and that child forming a deep, one-sided social relationship with the AI. And there aren't the safeguards there to understand crisis, moderate, have age gates. They're not there right now. And so teens are using this, and a young man committed suicide. They're in legal process to determine if AI was at fault. But I think how that plays out is up to law. What we see is that youth are using this to talk about their feelings, and at times getting a relationship that feels two-sided and is really not. This machine is predictably pulling letters out of a bag and doing a great job of predictably pulling out the ones that it thinks you will like. And that can be seductive. I was thinking about the problem, and then I remembered this book from 2011, Hamlet's BlackBerry. And he talks about the experience of dropping his BlackBerry, which now seems quaint, right? Because BlackBerries aren't that common. But dropping his BlackBerry in the pond when fishing with his kid, he was supposed to be on vacation, but was worried about work things and had his BlackBerry and dropped it in and it was gone. And the emotional turmoil that he went through, and he realized how ridiculous that was, that he was going through this over this tool. And he thought about it deeply, and he said, well, what I'm experiencing isn't new. This has happened before. These sort of technological leaps have created anxiety in a variety of ways. Socrates was not happy with Plato because Plato was writing things down, and Socrates was an oral tradition. And he thought, and it's written in the book so that we know about it, he even scolded Plato a few times in those conversations. Many different, Gutenberg having books available to all and cheap. That was a massive change. And now we have information. We have the equivalent of a cable television and fast internet in our pockets, all available to ourselves. We don't even fully understand what that means, but he had some advice. And create purposeful gaps, purposeful disconnection from these tools to give your mind time to synthesize, imagine, and decide, go on walks, write in notebooks, have no screen zones. And you don't want to rely on willpower because these tools are seductive. They're like, sometimes they're like slot machines in your hand. They're bing, 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 trying to get your attention. You should build cues. Some of the tools are building the cues in there where it says focus time. You can set up different focus time with these tools, but building cues away from the tool, dedicated thinking spot, hours, analog tools. Day may have a no electronics day. It's surprisingly hard for some people. And it's been hard for me because I use a lot of these tools. So I'm curious, and you get to vote on this one. This is another one of those interactive pieces, but how often do you deliberately unplug from technology? And there's no judgment here. If I were to put it on the scale, I would say it would be pretty low for me. I'm trying to work on it more. So yeah, it's pretty low. Somewhere between closer to never and not very close to daily. And the research about general trends is that we are a representative sample of the world today. It can be incredibly challenging, and often the apps on our phones make it harder. They were made to make it hard for you to want to put down. And so we need to do something. We need to figure out how to set boundaries with these tools and making those gaps deliberate. And that will be true of your staff. That will be true of the people you serve. And so we need to think about that very deeply when we're doing our work. One of the things we've done purposefully at CCNY is the reason why we use Mentimeter is because it's easy to get distracted by all the work that's pressures that we have on us. And so trying to get people to be interactive, to take a moment and focus on keeping people motivated has been one thing we've done. Another thing that we noticed at CCNY we've been talking about is that there are tools to thrive online, and there are tools, and these tools online are and now that they're in our pockets, are challenging, especially AI. And this book was written in 2012. Howard Rheingold had written many books that were predictive of things. And so when the first flip phones came out, he wrote a book about smart mobs and how people would use it to get together, but also use it to disrupt each other. And then he noticed that there was some needs about how to thrive online. And one of the chapters, an entire chapter, was what he called crap detection. How to spot misinformation, disinformation online, evaluate sources, use critical thinking. And we are living that right now. We get fake news. We get AI created content that looks so real that it can be hard to detect. And we need to figure out how to use our critical thinking tools so that we can understand that's not true. That doesn't seem right. And I think, especially when AI is creating these reasonable hallucinations in its output, that somebody who had written for syndicated columns looked at the output, thought it was good enough, didn't check, but it seemed reasonable. It seemed reasonably right, and used that in the newspaper. My experience is very early on, I've used AI for coding to be a co-pilot, a co-thinker, and we'll talk about co-intelligence in a little bit, to work with me to write code that faster. And one of the things that happened was I was looking at taking two softwares and the data that reside in those softwares. They have what's called an API. I'm not going to get into what an API is. It's just rules for sharing data. If you follow the rules, you get data. And if you think of them like Legos, you get enough of these tools and Legos, you can build your own thing, right? So at CCNY, we wanted to build our own thing. We wanted some data from two tools that had APIs and build something. So I said, well, here's the problem. And I put a prompt in ChatGPT and asked it to help me out. And it spit out this code. And I know how to read code without running it. I was reading it all, and it was all reasonable. It was very clear. I was like, oh, this is going to be great. Then I noticed the very first 2 lines of the code was get the functions from this tool. You can grab functions from different tools. And I went, I never heard about that tool. And I looked it up, didn't exist. Then it said, get this other function from this other tool. So I looked up the tool online. It doesn't exist. The rest of the code was predicated on the assumption of these 2 lines that these functions that were made by other people existed, and they didn't. So they're called hallucinations. And I fortunately didn't run the code and try and do it, but it made me laugh. Okay. Well, sure. If those things existed, this would work great. You're absolutely right. But that's the sort of stuff. It's so slippery that we have to be better at critical thinking. So I had read NetSmart in 2013. I'd written notes about it because I love keeping notes about these things. And I took a summary of NetSmart. I took my notes, I gave them to ChatGPT, and I said, what would be a checklist that we might use for crap detection of AI output? And I liked the output just as is. This is in line with what's in the book. It's in line with what I would think would be useful in my experience. And also the final piece is it gave me a new idea that hadn't occurred to me. So the reason why I'm saying all these things is I had read the book. I had taken my own notes. I knew the material, and I shared it with ChatGPT to talk to me about that material. And I could then verify the material myself. If I had never read the book, this could be all made up. I wouldn't know. And that's important. For one of the things you need to do is trust it and verify, like they say in the Army. And so ask for sources for your outputs. If AI gives you an output, you can ask it, what are your sources for this? If it doesn't give it to you already, it's getting better at giving those things out. Does it match your thinking, your known facts? If the specifics are a little strange, definitely verify. And I would verify no matter what. And the last piece, and I hadn't even thought of doing this, is run that same prompt with another model. If you've done it in ChatGPT, run it with Gemini. If you've done it in Gemini, maybe do Claude. There's a lot of different models out there, and those things could be helpful. So what are some things that you've run into that help tip you off that this is AI crap? What have you run into? What has helped you identify these things? And you can use menti.com, put in the code, and type in your answers. And if you're interested, you can come off mute and talk. We don't just have to use this, but I'm trying to be open to other learning styles. And some people like to type their thinking through.
I don't, my thought is too long to type.
It's tough.
I I've experienced a lot of AI crap, and I realize you really do have to be pretty hypercritical of whatever it's telling you, especially if it sounds too good to be true. I've tried using it for, like developing flows in Power Automate. I'm like, can it do this? And it's like, oh yeah, great. Here's the steps. Then you do it, and it's like, oh yeah, sorry, that doesn't actually work. It just wants to make you happy so badly that it will say whatever it takes. I was in a call yesterday where someone mentioned staying within your zone of genius. I guess I can turn
Mm,
my camera back on, but this idea of like, if you're trying to do something way outside your area of expertise, you're a lot more likely to get fooled by hallucination. If you stay within your zone of genius, then you have the critical mindset to really recognize what's good and what's not great.
love that. Stay within your zone of genius.
Or as my father used to say, you can't bullshit a bullshitter.
Right. Right. Oh yeah. The strange metaphors. Yeah. Yeah. Ask for sources. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So in 2024, a book came out called Co-Intelligence. I got to listen to about an hour long podcast about it. I haven't read it. And the podcast was very interesting. It was a podcast between the author and podcast host. And I thought this information would be helpful to share because I hadn't had a chance to read it. I think you should read it. I have it on my list to read. I also have a book called Slow Productivity. I just realized I should have put in here that I highly recommend. The staff are using it, of ways to create those gaps, called Slow Productivity. The idea is we were able to do great things without machine, right? Together. Let's get to some of that and then use machines to enhance what we do. So based on the podcast, some guidelines to work with AI. And and he said these during the podcast. I thought it was really nice. Invite AI to the table, be deliberate about it. But for areas, what was it, Kelly? In your genius?
Zone of genius.
Zone of genius. Yeah. So invite it to your zone of genius. I love that. Be the human in the loop. This is something that we learned when we were working on our policy, and we'll talk about that in a second. Use AI to extend your agency, but you own the outcome. And I think if the person who generated that reading list had thought about owning the outcome, they might have been a little bit more critical of AI. And I thought this was interesting. Treat it like a person, but not literally, just tactically, like it's an intern. Here's my zone of genius, and I need you to work on this thing that would take me a long time to deal with, and I don't have time to deal with it right now. And I know what good content from this would be. Like my code. I know how to write an API. I can write great code. I wanted some help in this area, and I could read it, and just by looking at the output, laugh. But assume that this is the worst AI you'll ever use. That's true. Today's AI is not tomorrow's AI. And so that same code, just 3 months later, I was working on another problem that was similar. I also got better at asking the right questions, and I got some help writing some code that allowed me to move through some problems faster and more efficiently. And that third one, treat it like a person. Imagine the intern has a lot of time, energy, and intelligence, but doesn't know what you know. And if you've ever worked with interns, you think, I use this metaphor, and bear with me, but it's like working with a ninja. You might say something that you think is very clear, like, well, I really don't like that person. And then the next day you're like, hey, how come that person didn't show up to the meeting? Oh, well, they're dead now because you said you didn't like them. So I assumed you wanted me to take them out. I'm a ninja. That's what I do. So you have to be really clear to this machine or you're going to have bad outcomes. You have to say, like, I need this thing. I like that person. Please don't take them out. And then Kismet, like Kim Harrington. If you're in Buffalo, you may know her. Kim Harrington is now with Forest Research and does amazing work. And they're putting out some tools, and I put a link to her, this comment. She called it a bot licker, meaning someone who's so AI positive, but it doesn't, just because you're not a bot licker doesn't mean you shouldn't be AI literate. And I thought her ideas were useful, like speed up your process, use it for drafting, but you need to be involved. Humans are the judge, own the output, let it get suggestions. Your judgment matters more than the machine. Because it's so slippery. you can get an output very quickly and think, well, geez, look at how efficient I'm being. So in 2022, we had, wow, AI is cool. Wow. And it's creepy. And so some friends and I we're coders. I'm going to share a story. In 2022, Jamie Bono and I were talking about AI and just all the cool things we could do. And you could, in 2022, if you had your beta access, which he and I had, you could code into ChatGPT. You didn't just have to write the prompt. So you could see what it was thinking and use code to interact with it. And so Jamie was like, hey, look, what if we were using ChatGPT to help us find resources for people in the community? And what if the way we solved it was to tell ChatGPT to create other bots, because we could do that through code, break down the problem into parts, and then each part have a bot and have each bot speak back to the main one who would evaluate it all, combine it all, and give it back to us. And it did amazing work. We asked it to look for resources and it found resources, and it assumed that resources would be needed for this person that we had made up for them. They would need some translation resources. They would need some supports at home. It expanded the thought into things that, wow, we hadn't even thought of that. And then soon after that, I saw online that someone did something similar, but they did one thing differently. They had shared with the bots the ability to go to Mechanical Turk. Mechanical Turk is Amazon's website where you can pay to have people do things for pennies. Like, hey, can you look at these things and say, which one of these things look good? Get some advice from people. Which one of our logos do you resonate with more? And we'll pay you however many people to look at it. So you can get thousands of people to answer that for pennies. And so they gave the bot via API rules to move data, access to Mechanical Turk, and I think like $5 to spend there if it had a problem that it couldn't solve. And so it went, and one of the sub bots, and because you're looking at it from code, you can see what it's thinking. One of the sub bots comes back and says, I have a problem. I need to get access to this website, but it's asking me to look at these pictures and choose things, and I can't do that. So the main bot says, well, go to me. It thinks, well, we have to solve this problem. So go to Mechanical Turk and ask someone to look at the pictures for you and give you the answer, and then you can get into the website. It was public data, so that's good news. The bot asked the person for help on Mechanical Turk. The person smelled some crap. They were like, oh, that doesn't seem right. And it says, are you a bot? Which I don't know if I would have thought of in 2022, but they were like, are you a bot? And the bot replied, I am visually impaired. It didn't lie. It said, I'm visually impaired. And so the person helped them out and they got into this website. It was public data. It's innocuous, but that's the creepy part. That's the stuff that makes me a little creeped out by it. I'll give another example. Well, I'll give another example in a little bit. We did some cool stuff with Social Current, and it's both cool and creepy. It's still there. We did some early experimentation at CCNY, and then we started having governance worries. We were real worried about, because we have HIPAA. We are SOC 2 compliant, which means just a lot of controls to keep track of protected health data, because we care about that and we don't want to mess it up. And we were relying on our policies, our HIPAA policies, to keep us safe. But then in around 2023, when ChatGPT launched to a larger audience, we realized we needed a specific generative AI policy for this. And we worked through it and revised it. And it's been revised as early as April of this year, kept it up to date. And so our guardrails are around being responsible, ethical, make sure it's aligned with our values and laws. Do not put PHI, trade secrets, PII into this tool. If we don't sign a business associates agreement with the tool, You cannot put PHI in here. That's really important. And that the user is responsible for the output. We happened along on that choice. And then some of the things we've been reading supports it. The current state is that it's working, but it's still a little messy. We're trying to figure out what might work. But we didn't just adopt tools. We adopted some habits, which is something that Malik talked about in that podcast that I listened to about co-intelligence. What sort of habits did we bring about? And we've been bringing AI to the conversation, and we've been explicit about it together as a team. And speeding up processes, I'll give a good example. We were in focus groups that were recorded. The focus groups were not private, they were public. We turned those recordings into transcriptions, and we provided those transcriptions to AI to come up with themes. Lots of text is something AI can do really well. And then we also read through them for themes too and saw if they matched or not. But that allowed us to, AI found some themes that we hadn't thought of and probably would never have come upon, which was lovely. We use it to draft, edit, and give our point of view. It is the way I talked about in the beginning. This is my thinking. This is my process, and I'm using this tool to help. Let it suggest, let it come up with a lot of suggestions. Ask for lots of them. It can do a lot of them, so that's fun. But don't let it speak for you, and do no harm. That's pretty important. So where are you at in the policy curve? And I'm not trying to put people on the spot. These are anonymous. How are we doing out there? Okay. Great. So if you don't have a policy, we're going to give you a policy template. Hopefully that'll help kickstart the drafting. And if you are drafting, hopefully this will help you with some of the pieces. And basically I took our policy, took out the parts that were CCNY specific and made a generalized one of it, because there's some things in there about, again, do no harm, you are an owner, that sort of thing. So, and you don't have to write, you can unmute. What sort of things have you run into? What has your experience been so far? What sort of things have you thought, well, that's really cool? What things have been creepy? What things are you worried about? What keeps you up at night, as someone said in the beginning? And you can unmute for that or type it in here. Everybody's good. Or they're typing.
David, can you say the prompt again?
Sure. What has been your experience with AI is really what I'm curious about. What things have you run into that's been interesting, useful? What things are challenging? What's scary? I want to get kind of your perspective.
I've been using it a lot for content generation, drafting things. That first round, just like getting pen to paper, not my favorite. So I've been using it for that. A little bit of image generation, and I've been playing around a lot with Power Automate. And so I've been using it a ton to learn that, but it definitely is kind of tricky to learn something new with AI when it's not that trustworthy of a teacher. So it's kind of made it a little extra challenging. It's been interesting.
I might recommend a tool called Notebook LM. It is made by Google, and we'll send that to you with the presentation as well. What it does is it takes sources. And so you could take a lot of your documentation and even even videos, YouTube videos of people talking about it as long as there's a transcription. And then you can have it create flashcards for you, notes, study habits, study tips. It'll make a podcast for you, at a short to long podcast. And that's the cool, creepy one that we ran into, because I learned in 30 minutes a lot of information that I wanted to kind of get as I was on a drive. But the podcast is two voices. It's a male and female voice that are AI generated. They interrupt each other. They breathe. They get excited. They calm down. It sounds like two people talking to each other, and that can be a little creepy. It was very useful, and I shared this on LinkedIn for people to share.
I've also used it for interview prep for a job, and I used the voice mode in ChatGPT, and that was also, I mean, the AI voice is very, like, so realistic, it's creepy. 'Cause he does, like, they breathe and they're like, "I'm thinking." I'm like, "You're not thinking, you're not real." But it does make it much easier to have a natural conversation with the bot.
Yeah. Tech questions because of yes, the people pleasing. It scares me. Users become too reliant on the model. Yeah.
At my organization, we decided to launch a few kind of AI workshops that for people who are interested in using it, just to give them some ideas and also some guardrails. And one of the topics we decided to cover was coaching. And I had seen a recent interview with someone who is a professional coach talking about how they foresee AI kind of overtaking their job in a way. And they were trying to embrace that and deal with the identity loss and things like that. But when I started to research how people use AI for coaching, it became very big and overwhelming, and even scarier to me because of just different things it was being suggested that you could use it for. In some cases, helping people when it comes to processing feelings and emotions and mental health things. And you brought up that youth who ended up dying by suicide, potentially becoming overly reliant on a chatbot to process feelings or emotions. So that started to freak me out a bit just in doing some research about how people might use AI as a coach. And here I am trying to use that research to prepare for a workshop to encourage staff to use it in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of our staff is a social worker. She has a PhD in social work. I feel like this was an advanced move that she did, but she knew how to ask it in a way that was safe for her. She was about to go into a challenging conversation, and she asked ChatGPT to tell her a story of how it would go well. That was powerful. I did that for this particular meeting, just for the heck of it. I'm like, I'm not as worried about public speaking. I've had enough training to lower the worries. They don't go away, but it lowers them. But I thought I'd try it out. And it was helpful. And it can be a slippery slope. We're like, well, tell me about how should I respond to my wife? Or as South Park did, they had AI basically doing the conversations for you to your significant other, which meant you weren't really having the conversation. Marketing person, draft and make appropriate size posts for different social. Yes. Yeah. And you're the expert in who you are, but maybe not great at marketing. CCNY is terrible at marketing. We just hired someone, Anna, who couldn't make it here because I used a new tool and it kicked her out. But she's a great marketer. Thank goodness. But I get it. It's hard. I like the key points of a lot of information. Yeah. Grid lines and layouts. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I'm terrible at design. So that would be helpful for me. Thank you for sharing, everybody. I appreciate that. Got about 10 more minutes. I wanted to share some of the tips that staff at CCNY shared. I asked them quick prompt. They had 200 characters to respond. First one about AI note-taking. This happened where Zoom added AI note taking to all of our Zoom calls, turned it on for everybody and didn't tell us. And people were having a meeting. A person left the meeting and they continued to have a conversation that included a conversation about that person. And that AI took all the notes and shared it with everybody. And that person's feelings were hurt. And it was, a natural thing where the two people who were left thought they were the only people in the room and the bot was still there. One of the staff said that they understood our AI policy, our generative AI policy, which I felt was really good. And they said, make sure you can understand it like you can explain it to an 8-year-old. So Doug is our IT person. He has used it, Gemini. He doesn't like Gemini anymore, but privacy, business agreements, you have to have them with these tools if you're going to do something really challenging. He also said, ask it to explain it like I'm 5. If you're trying to learn a new concept, that has been helpful. Doug also said, tell it thank you because when they grow legs, they'll remember you. This was interesting. So we have a DISC assessment, which is a personality assessment. It's like the Myers-Briggs, and use it to align with your communication based on their DISC assessment. I thought that was clever. And since I'm a supervisor, I'm wondering who's using it on me. Use it to fine tune your agendas, event planning. If you're neurodivergent, one of our staff was saying, use it for task list completion. Ask it, use the word consolidate, and then avoid emphasis dashes. Emphasis dashes are often given out in these outputs and they're not particularly right. And don't use it with them because it doesn't parse them well. Grant searching and writing has been helpful. Create your social media posts. One of the things that people are saying on LinkedIn is that if they see a lot of emojis in the output, they assume AI wrote it, because AI likes to put a lot of emojis in LinkedIn output because there's no other way to structure your text. I have done some things where I'm writing an RFP, I'm reading the RFP materials, and I upload the RFP into ChatGPT and ask it questions while I'm thinking through things. Maybe not telling it to write it for me, but explain like I'm 5 these instructions on how I'm supposed to deliver this, because I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to deliver this RFP to someone. And that was really helpful because it said, take the envelope, do this, put it that way. And I did exactly that because their instructions were really challenging. I had a state document that was a public state document that I had read, uploaded, and kind of had a conversation with ChatGPT, like a chat with somebody who understood it, and said, this document is the source. Let's have a conversation about it. And it gave me some neat ideas. Some of it was crap, but because I've read it, I could understand the output. So I want to be respectful of time and want to give folks an opportunity to share any other ideas or final thoughts. And we're going to send out a survey, give you a chance to give feedback. Anna's going to send that out later. I'll get the summary, but I won't get if you are all say that this really stunk, I won't be able to know who just said that. And I won't be able to come after you. No, I'm fine. Hopefully you found value in this. I want to continue to have these conversations. I also want to be clear. I'm using this because I want to know more. I want y'all to know more together. If you want to continue to have material from CCNY, send me an email and we can sign you up for our email newsletter, but I'm not using this registration as just an assumption of permission for that, because that's not how we work. That's not how you create community. And thank you so much for attending. really appreciate it and for participating. Hopefully you learned some new tools here, and yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Anything anyone want to share before we go? No. Okay.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your day. Yeah. Thank you. Be well.
Take care.
Dave, one thing I was hoping to hear though is